Hi everyone, it's Grace. Welcome back to another video on my channel, and I have Ben here with me to do our final installment that has been a bit of a long time coming of our discussions for The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. So that's this bad boy right here, which I'm finally done holding this up in my videos, except for this one. But we are going to start off with like a spoiler-free full series review, and then I think we will probably go into a little bit of, well, maybe we'll go into spoiler overall series thoughts, but primarily it'll be a series review spoiler-free, and then we're going to move into like a full spoiler discussion of Price of Spring, the final book in the series. So like I mentioned, I do have Ben here with me, which if you've watched the other videos, if you watch any of my videos, I feel like you probably should know who he is, but I'll give him the opportunity to introduce himself regardless.
That was me. Gesturing from the books. I am the same person that I've always been.
Can I leave that in? No.
Yeah. That was it.
Okay, so we're going to start quickly with like a kind of description or synopsis of the series, just as almost like a little sales pitch. So Ben, I hope that you prepared notes after our attempt yesterday. Would you like to give a little bit of a synopsis?
Yes, I'm going to read my own thoughts on what the series is about. The city-state of Saraket dominates the summer. This is a terrible description on the back of that book, to be honest.
Wait, this one is way better.
Wait, what's that?
This is like a synopsis. It's way better though.
That's hilarious.
Hang on, we've discovered something here, I think. The first sentence is the same. Ota Maki, the neglected son of a political leader, once thought to be the great hope of the school of poets protecting the Kai Empire, now spends his days working as a manual laborer under an assumed name. Caught between ancient wonders and a modern empire, Ota wants nothing more than the normalcy of a mundane existence and the love of the beautiful Liat. Enter the Gults, a juggernaut of an empire committed to laying waste to all lands with their ferocious army. Now all depends on Ota, and the choices made by the ones he loves most will save the world or lead to its ruin.
Yeah, that's a real good review for like the third book onwards. Like, you know what I mean?
They
Like
kind of like
that. If you read the Galt bit, it's like, oh, that's gonna be there straight from the beginning, and it's like, oh no, that's
well, that's actually what I thought when I started reading this because of this.
Yeah.
But it's like the first paragraph is like a synopsis of the first book, and then it jumps straight to like escalated conflict.
Yeah, so just pretend you heard the first part. Also, I imagine you're going to pitch shift that and then map it to my mouth so it looks like I said that. But well, yeah, that's what the book's about, and it's incredible. I think we can both agree on that, is that the series is fantastic as a whole.
Incredible. Yeah.
I feel like we did some real in-depth reviews on the second and third book. I've done a conversation on the first one, but that wasn't with you because you hadn't read it at that point.
Yes.
And that was plug for Pete's channel. That was on Ponderings with Pete's channel.
Yeah, I'll have his channel linked, and I'll go find that live show and I can link that too. I'll just have all of them, like I'll have that one linked, and then I'll just have like our other discussions linked as well.
Hell yeah.
In the description.
But yeah, so I feel like we've done a lot of deep diving on it, and so to keep it kind of general, the character work in the books are phenomenal. Like if you're looking for a character deep dive and something that's very individual in the sense of how much time is passing in this series, then this is the one for you. Like you start and end with very different characters, but not like you usually do in fantasy books, where it's like, oh, these 3 years sure did change me a lot. And it's it's like these like
60 years change.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
Me starting as an 18-year-old compared to me as a 65-year-old man sure did change a lot, and that it's really good in that sense.
Also,
And
just
the
to
other,
clarify for anyone, when you say we finish with different characters, you mean we finish with changed characters, not that
yeah,
we
yeah, yeah, yeah,
actually finish with different characters.
yeah. It's
Like
not
we
like, oh,
follow a core group.
yes. What I mean is, it's like, it's not like, yeah, I started as an 18-year-old and I was such like a little gig, but now I'm a 21-year-old and I'm so much older. It's not one of those ones where it's like,
Yeah.
did you really? Are you that much different? It's like, no, these are very different characters in the sense of the progression they go through.
Yeah.
Uh, and my
Which
other
I just
main,
want to say, I thought, like, initially going into the series, I was a little bit scared. I thought that would be a negative for me because I was thinking, like, I am a character driven reader and I like to follow the characters through their journeys. So I was thinking, oh no, we're going to be missing like 10 or 15 years of their
mm,
lives at a time. But Daniel Abraham just does such a great job of like kind of seamlessly transitioning from book to book. Like, you obviously have a missing time period, but he, through like subtle clues and like subtle, I guess, exposition, he kind of like really guides you smoothly through the missing time and just like tells you how this character has changed. They're the same, but they've changed. And
yeah,
it's not nearly as like jumpy as I was afraid that it would be. It's done so well.
yeah, I would agree. It's kind of like, it really puts it down to the idea of, um time may go by, but like this is following the main points in these people's lives.
Yeah.
It's like, how often does something truly important happen
Life
in your life?
changing.
Yeah, life changing happen. And it's like four things happen, and we're following those four books. Like, it's not
It's
everything
like
that
the
happens in
antithesis of
between.
Wheel of Time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The entirety of that
exactly.
series happens over the span of like 2 years.
And that would be my other big point, is that if this isn't one of those ones where you go into a series and you're like, oh, 4 books, that's quite the commitment. Like four books. It's like all of these are so short
Yeah.
that I think it's like, it literally is like less than a Wheel of Time book or a Stormlight Archive book, it
It's
feels like.
definitely less than like the longest Wheel of Time book, and
Yeah.
it's for sure less than a Stormlight book.
And you're getting the entire series, you're getting an entire life of people in that
And
frame.
also, like, I know that depending on who you are, 4 books just may seem like a higher amount, but 4 books was the perfect number of books for him
Mm,
to tell this story. It's not as though you're getting into a series that like got a little bloated or got a little long. It's like well, you can tell by the titles of the books that he purposely was segmenting, like he had a plan going in because since they're named for the seasons and since they have like symbolism attached to them. So he had a plan, and like the way that he told the story, like it progresses really well
mm.
and none of it like shouldn't be there basically, like all of
Yeah,
it is
it's a
important.
very precisely told story.
Yeah.
There's no fat to this book. It's like, it's so lean and to the point.
And the thing that I
And
find interesting about that is I feel like a lot of books like that are books where my complaint is that I don't get to spend enough time with the characters. But he balances it so well where like the story has a small enough focus that
mm,
it's truly the characters driving everything. So you get to spend time with them while you're doing the plot, and it's just perfectly balanced.
and the other thing I was going to say is that, in terms of the prose, I feel like you're definitely a big fan of the
I'm a big
prose.
proponent of the prose in here. Well,
I'm a big
you can talk about it if you'd like.
I was just going to say it as an in, but my big proponent is, he talks about food. And I
Mm.
love when authors talk about food, but
I
not
thought you were
like,
just gonna say, and I love food.
I love food. I mean, it really shows. But like, they didn't. It's not one of those ones that it's like flowery writing about food. It's just like, yo, they put these spices together and ate this food, and I'm like, God, I wish I was eating that right now. That sounds
Yeah.
delicious. And that would probably be my main description. Is that, I think I've said it in another video. Is that he's very straight to the point with his description, and because of the, we haven't mentioned that it's an Asian influence culture in this video, but with it being based on Asian culture, it gives him the malleability of how we already interpret some of the things he's talking about, such as the clothes they wear, the weather, the flowers, the scenery, etc. We have a predetermined
Hmm.
aspect to it where it allows him just to be very straightforward and be precise with what he's describing, that then we really flesh out the rest of the description based on that.
And then to go off of that, like I think that the strength is his word choice, because like I think that a lot of the times his word choice is just perfect because it allows him to be straight to the point, because it's not like he needs extra words, but he's just using the right words so that you picture exactly what he wants you to picture. And like I always felt like I was right there where it didn't need to be overly descriptive for him to actually just like describe it to me in a perfect way.
mm,
So like, because what you're saying about the food, I think just is a great example of it, but it applies to like a lot of the things that he does.
yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
it's just picking the right words, whether it's like the right word for an emotion where you can really like feel what a character's feeling, or whether it's just like the simple description of the food where it's described in a really appealing way, but it's still described in a really simple way. So
Yeah. The other big one for me, because all of these are going to be positive, is that
we did both like give the series as a whole like 5 stars, 10 out of 10. So
yeah, which was the other thing I was going to say. There were two things in my mind. One is that I don't think any of the books are straight up 10 out of 10 perfect. I think I gave all of them 9, apart from maybe Autumn War, which I feel like
I think
I
Autumn
would.
War was perfect, but
Yeah,
it's just
but
me.
I think they all have little nitpicky problems that could technically be picked up on, but as a whole, the series like gels together to create perfection. Like it's a sum
I
of its
totally
parts.
agree. I mean, I
Um,
agree, like in the sense that I didn't necessarily not give any of them 5 stars because I did, but I agree with you that they're like, when you take them together, they become even better. Like the
yeah,
combination, and then once you look at the whole of what he did, it's just works together perfectly.
it's like an example of that is I won't give any specifics, but there was a character that was my least favorite in book 2. And in our discussion of book 2, I was like, yeah, I don't think enough was done with this character, blah blah blah. And then you get to the third and fourth one, and you're like, this is genius writing. Like the groundwork done to
Yeah.
set those, like it was set the motion in play in book 2 and have it kind of on your mind. You're like, this didn't feel and
Yeah.
that's really fantastic. And that would be my other thing, is the ambiguity of the series. That was going to be my other point, is that Daniel Abraham does not, like, he doesn't explain everything. There are things purposely vague and unexplained in this series that unravel themselves and give reason later on. They're not even necessarily said outright later on, but one of them will be discussed in The Price of Spring. But it's the kind of if you start thinking about it when you get later on, you're like, oh, this is why I'm feeling this way, because there was a bit of vagueness in the first book that sets up that idea in your head, kind of like, why, who, and
Hmm.
then it's there for you at the end where you're like, oh, genius, just genius.
The other positive, as if we're gonna say a negative, but the other the, the other positive that I was gonna say, like it ties into the whole fact that the series as a whole does better than like any individual book necessarily, but I really like the plot progression because it feels natural, but it still feels like it's as small of a scale as it can be for the story, if that makes sense. Because like the first 2 books are pretty contained.
Super small scale.
Like the first book is a very small storyline, but you get hints that you get hints that there's a wider world existing here. And then in the second book, you start to get even more threads that connect like different parts of the world. But the story itself is still very contained and focused on like a small number of characters that we're following, but you just get to expand a little more, whether it's your main characters like traveling between different locations a little bit more. And then when you get to the third book, you step it up again. It steps up a lot more between the second and third, but I still feel like Daniel Abraham only added the amount of perspectives that he had to. Like, he widens your perspective, but he doesn't like just give you a bunch of new characters or new locations for no reason. He's very intentional about that.
Yeah.
So he just gives you the right number of perspectives to know what you need to know, but he doesn't confuse you or anything. Like, you still have a handle on who your core people are that you're following. And he's also great at achieving like sympathy for new characters right away. Like, you feel connected to them very quickly. And I guess I kind of don't want to comment beyond that, because I don't want to comment on how it progresses from the third to the fourth book.
Yeah.
But like, that was one thing that I really liked about it, because I don't have any complaints about series that give you a lot of different perspectives necessarily, because if you have a big wide world, I understand why you need to do that. But I just feel like he could have given us more, but he didn't feel like he needed to, and he didn't need to, you know? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, there are plenty of different cultures mentioned in this series that we never meet.
Yeah.
We're aware of them, you hear about them, but they are not in play in this story, because this is telling a very rigid story. That it's going on, we hear about it, but it doesn't matter to the plot at all.
Yeah.
It's just kind of backdropping for why certain decisions are being made. So yeah, I agree with you. Well, to give a like, because of course they mentioned the goals at the first in that description you've just done.
Yeah.
It's also a very interesting magic system in that way.
Without spoilers, you can say that one thing that's really interesting about it is that there are cultures that like have a magic system, and cultures that don't, that are very reliant on like invention and industrialism. So it's a very
Yes.
interesting contrast. I won't say which cultures, but
No.
like
But it's
it is a
very,
very interesting contrast, and that comes into play.
yes, it's very Eastern versus Western in that sense. The idea of spiritualism versus industrialism,
Mhm.
and that I loved everything to do with the clash of those two. For someone who loves what's traditional medieval fantasy more to like Flintstocky type stuff,
Do you mean
industrial
flintlock?
era fantasy. Flintlock, yeah. What did I say?
Flintstock.
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. Uh, like for someone that prefers the more traditional sense, this did a real good job of when it was introduced, the more industrial side. I was like, I was very excited. And that doesn't normally happen for me. Like, that's why I'm nervous about Mistborn Era 2, because I'm like, do I care? I don't know. But this did a good job of just easing me in, and then just it dangled a carrot in front of me, and then just had me follow it for the whole series.
Okay, well, I think that I really like what we've said about this spoiler free, but I do think that we've said enough, because we do need time to get into our spoiler discussion for Price of Spring.
Absolutely.
So all before we get into spoilers, all I will say, and I'm sure
Wait, I have one more thing beforehand.
Okay.
I have one more thing. Sorry. If you're looking, because it's very hard to get the series, as you know, as I know, you don't really know because you went into a store and it was sat there like
Well, I
like a
know because I
godsend.
got lucky and found it. And then ever since then, I've been like, hey, maybe I could buy a copy and send it to somebody who wants it. And it's like zero available at any store ever.
Yeah, it does not exist. So it's very difficult to find. So I had to buy a binder for the second one. It's the most disgusting cover you've ever seen in your life. Uh, but I would recommend Abe Books if you want to buy it. ABE BOOKS. I don't know whether this is just good in the UK, but I think I got this for like £2 and it was free shipping. And I got the third and fourth book for like £3.50, also free shipping. And there's loads of them on there, like plenty. So that would be my recommendation. I think there's also World of Books, but because it's impossible to buy them new, those are the 8 books is the books, like the website I'd recommend.
Yeah, I've never ordered anything from there, but I remember you saying that, and they seem to have the most in terms of like used options. If you live in Canada and you're lucky, you might be able to find the bind up at an Indigo. If
Mm.
you're like me and you walk into one time and you're like, hey, look, there it is. And I'm so glad that I bought it. I mean, yeah, I guess that's basically it, spoiler free. The only thing that I was going to say, and that I'm sure Ben will agree with me on, is that you need to read these books.
Yes.
You need to read this series. And we are going to scour the world as a booktube community and buy every copy of this series and read them and make sure that they reprint it, because they should do that.
They should.
Anyway, it is time to get into spoilers for the fourth book in the series, Price of Spring. So this has been a long time coming, so we have a lot of thoughts, but I'm sure we're also going to be like finding our way because they're less fresh in our brain as they could be.
Yeah.
But there was still like so much good stuff in this book to like get into and discuss. And the first thing that I want to talk about is Aya, because we start the book with
Mm.
her. I thought it was really interesting to see like a little bit of character development from her in an Autumn, and you get the hints that like she's going to be a very interesting woman, like on an interesting kind of character trajectory. And then we immediately start out Price of Spring with her like as a doctor and obviously as the emperor's daughter, and it's kind of a, you get the sense immediately that they're kind of like two conflicting sides of her identity,
Mm.
because you find out that she doesn't agree with her father anymore, and that's like the central conflict of the story.
Yeah, the thematic center point of the book is the Aya basically having two father figures and her having to choose which one she supports or whether she supports either of them and whether she's going to be her own person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, Aya is definitely a highlight in this book because she's the central, she's the linchpin on all of this.
Yeah,
She ties everyone together.
she's sort of like the, well, yeah, she literally does tie everyone together, and she's also sort of like the moral compass, or like the,
Mhm.
I guess compass is an okay word for it, but like she's the moral thread. Like we're following her, ultimately her path and her decisions, and she's presented as a very mature character, which I like. It's not like necessarily a petty problem that she has with her father, and it's not like, I don't know, it's a very deep and emotional like disagreement that they have, like a fundamental disagreement of their values, that
Yeah,
she doesn't, you know, she doesn't like that he's leaving a generation of Kayam women behind, even though like this is the only way that Ota sees forward. And you can see why both of them would be right,
yeah,
which is what makes it so interesting.
yeah,
So like you can very clearly see like why she's jaded towards this path at the start of the book, and why she's like with Mati and in support of trying to like recapture the Honda. So I like how that's I like how there's such a strong sense of foreboding, which I know that we discussed during this book. Like when you read this book, especially at the start, there's such a strong feeling that you're waiting for the other shoe to drop,
mm, mm,
and you're waiting for something terrible to happen,
mm.
and he captures that feeling so well. Like,
And he also does a great job of awful things do happen, but you're like, that's not all. I know that terrible thing just happened, but there's more. I still don't think that's everything. And he does a great job of building up the terrible things where you're like, that's still not all of it. Come on, there's more to cut. It's like a baby burp and you're trying to get all the gas out. It's like, come on, I know there's more in there.
Yeah.
And or like holding someone's hair back when they're being sick. It's like, just get it all out. There's terrible things coming. Just get them out.
Or like when you're chasing your dog trying to figure out what they have in their mouth.
Yeah.
Give it to me. What do you have?
Yeah, it does do a great job of building up
I think
that
that,
feeling of dread.
yeah, like he does a great job of that because you don't necessarily know which part of the plot that he's setting up is going to go so wrong. And then in different ways, both of them do, because when he's trying to set up Danat with like Anna, there's a huge wrench into that.
Yeah, that was mad.
But then, like you said, that's a terrible thing that happens where you're like, oh no, this isn't all.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, it's like this is an appetizer.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going to go terrible next? It's like, I'm waiting for the next course.
I genuinely had like feelings of anxiety while reading this, despite like loving it. I'm like, this is a really weird mix of negative and positive feelings because I'm so anxious about what's going to go wrong here. There's so many thoughts swirling around in my head about what I wanted to talk about.
Maybe if we go into the central conflict between like the concept of the book.
Ota and Mati?
Yes. So the idea that the Kayem, all of the men are now, no, all of the women are barren. All of the Galtic men are barren as well. They cannot have kids. So, and the Andat are lost. They are thrown out into the wind. They're gone. Yep. And so Ota is trying to form an alliance with Galt to keep out, because all of the scavenging nations have heard about this now and they're all convening to destroy. And so we see Balazar. Balazar is, to quickly touch on it because we don't really have time to talk about Balazar. Balazar's amazing because you see him just be content with the fact that he got rid of the Andat. Like we get to see him kind of like walk around and be like, yeah, I did it. I don't care. And him and Ota are working together to start an alliance to bring over men from Galt, take women from the Kite, and mix them round to continue the lines. Marty, on the other hand, with Aya, believe that that is leaving behind a generation of Kayati women, and that they are looking to bring back the Andat to fix the problem, as in bring back the ability to have children.
Yeah.
Question is, are they only bringing back the ability to have children for the Kayem, which is a big moral question asked during the book, which then changes things.
Yeah.
That's essential.
The other big question, I think, aside from that, the other big moral question is that once you bind one of the Andat again, there are so many things that you can do with it, because depending on which one you're holding, there's obviously different ways to interpret what it can do. So if you have the ability to restore the Kayam women to being able to have children, then what do you have the ability to do to the Galts, and will you do it?
Yeah. I feel like Ota has a lot going on, but it's not as much as Marty in this book.
Well, I think that Ota kind of continues on his trend that he has throughout the whole series, is that his strength is in like interpersonal connections and conversations. Like his most interesting scenes are always when he's like forming connections with other people. So even though he has like big things going on plot wise, like trying to orchestrate this whole alliance, still the reason that he doesn't have as much going on is because like his most interesting things are never plot things.
Yeah, that's true. Even though he is integral, it is kind of like he's moving along with the plot, and he's just like meeting people on the way. Yeah, so I don't know whether you have much to say about Ota, like within the plot.
One thing that I do want to like touch on is how much I love his letters to Kian and how much he still like loves her. I don't know, like those parts, every time that he like reflects on Kian or talks about her to somebody else, like to Anna, I'm like crying because I love Ota and Kian so much.
Yeah.
And how much he loves her. and it's so sweet. And I feel like Ota is a really like he's a really smart person, and like he's a good leader, but I just love that in private moments he needs to like, I guess, ask like Kian for advice or like write to her about what he's doing, like just because she is still a form of support for him
Mm.
even when she's not there anymore. I don't know, I love them a lot.
He's a very retrospective and introspective person,
Hmm.
but doesn't quite have the belief that he can do that by himself.
Hmm.
If you get what I mean,
Which
that's
is
why he
interesting
relies
because
on.
he literally does do it by himself. He just still
Yeah,
needs to feel
exactly.
like he has that support in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he's a very strong character because, but he feels that he isn't in some ways.
Hmm.
His relationship with his son is very interesting in this book.
Yeah,
Um,
I like his relationship with his kids really,
yeah,
because it seems like they just respect each other.
absolutely. Yeah, which I think because it's interesting that you only need the one scene with Aya and Kian in the last book where Aya says, "I don't." She says like, "Oh, he's your kid," type of thing. I'll just tell everyone he's your kid, and
Mhm.
then like Kian's just like, "Okay, we need to sort this out before you leave this room," and she's just like, "Tell me why you're an idiot, please." And and Aya's like, "Because I said this," and she's like, "Please
Yeah.
elaborate more on why you're an absolute idiot." And then Kian leaves, and it's very much one of those conversations where it's like, this is just one of those, but this has probably happened a lot, and it's like, okay, this explains why Aya is who she is. She's got the introspection from Ota. She can look at her own decisions and reflect on them, but she's also got Kian's,
She's got the ability to get things done like Kian.
yeah, take no shit attitude.
It's very evident, like based on the way they would have raised her. And I feel like, well, this is like sort of the point you're making, or it's at least related to it. But the fact that in this book, she can so fundamentally disagree with her father and then like still kind of respect him, but have the
Mm,
strength to like go against him when she thinks that it's right, is directly correlated with the way that they would have raised her.
yeah, and also be introspective enough to, when she realizes it's going too far, be aware of the situation and be like, oh no, no, no,
Hmm.
this is gone. Like we've gone too far now.
Yeah.
um which I feel like the big talking point in this book is all to do with Marty. Like in
Oh
my
God.
opinion,
Go
like Marty is the
go off. Go off.
is incredible. um because of course in our portrayal of Winter, I talked about the idea that I was like, Marty, it just seems like he didn't do a lot in the plot. Like it feels like he was just going along and he didn't know what was happening. And then you get to the last two, like the end of Autumn War and the end of this book, and you're like, that's because he doesn't know what's going on. He wants to be more than he ever can be.
He so desperately wants to be like an important person or
Mm,
the person who saves everyone. Like it's such a tragic like character arc for him.
it absolutely is. It's heart wrenching. You read it, and it's really well done. Where you start this book, and you're like, could he? Like, it seems like you're like, oh, he could redeem himself. He's enjoying teaching. He's changing the fundamentals of how it works. He's allowing women to be poets. He's progressing, but then it slowly starts needling its way in, where you're kind of like, he's saying things and he's doing things and he's acting ways where you're like, he's still Marty. He still desperately needs to be the one. He describes himself as like, only me and Kamai have controlled the Andat. And it's like, you summoned one and
And
that was it. You didn't
failed.
control it. It
Yeah.
literally ripped apart your entire society. But he still has that fallacy of like, I controlled an Andat. And he
And
still has that.
to your point, like when you were saying that at the start of the book, he could redeem himself.
Mm,
I agree, but I think that one thing that Daniel Abraham did really well was the hints that like the reason that he has this group of women is because, well, not maybe not because, but a large part of their dynamic with him is that he wants to be the one that they look up to.
absolutely. Yeah.
Like he wants that role so badly, and he want like it because it all started with Aya in the previous book, right? Like he wants to be like the uncle figure that like she like looks up to and loves the most or whatever. And you can definitely see that carried into this. Like I don't think that it was a creepy dynamic necessarily, because these are all grown women, but you can tell that there is still that innate need for him to be like the position of power, the person that they
Hmm.
respect, the like pinnacle of like who they would come to, and kind of just that whole dynamic
Yeah,
is there from the start of the book. And at the start of the book you can't tell whether it's going to go well or poorly,
yeah.
basically.
It's so well done. Like it literally is one of those series where now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, "Well, I could read this again.
Oh my
Like I
god, me too.
just could."
Well, I mean, his whole relationship with Vanjit is kind of an extension of like what I was just saying, because Mati is their teacher, but I think that there's a really interesting dynamic shift once they finally do manage to bind clarity of sight, because like they didn't, I think, do their due diligence in considering like what holding the Ondat can do to somebody,
Mm.
because like you said, Mati like thinks of himself as having held one, but he really hasn't. And Kumai would be the one to know like what it can do to you and what the mental struggle is like. And so once Vanjit is facing that, like I believe that she didn't have the right personality to begin with, because it's
No,
not that like it's not that how do I put this?
I would
Not
put
that
it
she was a
down.
bad person, but if the Ondat amplifies the worst parts, then she didn't have the right personality.
Mhm.
And it becomes evident once you see what the Ondat does to her. And then there's a very clear shift in power once Mati realizes that he has like this theoretical authority as the teacher, but Vanjit is the one that really has the power once she holds the Ondat, which I feel like
Yeah,
he failed to consider
yeah.
properly. So
It's like a really simple story in the sense of it's just power corrupts, and the idea of the even sadder one, which is uh people's trauma, even if they think that they're doing a good job of handling it, if then given a position to act a certain way, trauma will manifest itself and you will act in a way that you wouldn't if you didn't have that trauma.
mhm.
And of course, like Marty is an example of that. Marty has, it's not the same way as Vanjit. Vanjit has trauma of her family dying, etc. But Marty has it in the sense of
Failure.
failure. Yeah, not being respected as a poet, not being able to choose between Liat and being a poet, having like being with Liat when Otar was there, that feeling of betrayal, etc. The Marty constantly is losing, and there's a built-up atmosphere of resentment and trauma, just built up trauma. This whole book is the reason and that can't exist is because you your trauma and power will just corrupt you and you'll lose control. um which brings me to my central thesis on what this entire series is about,
Okay.
which is that it's a story about nuclear
Oh yeah. Right,
de-escalation.
right, right, right,
And
right.
the one thing I didn't even think about was the fact that the and that in the end affect children, which when you look at the bombing of Japan, they had massive problems with deformed, like all kinds of problems specifically around children and the birthing of a new generation.
Yeah,
And I
that's a
feel like I
very
didn't
strong
even,
parallel.
yeah, I feel like I didn't even clock that when I first read it. It took me like a week and I was like, ah. And like I just think it's so well done. Just everything is so perfectly precise. Do you have anything
Well,
else to
it's
talk about
kind
there?
of, sorry, this is like not related to your nuclear point, but related to like what we were just talking about
Mm,
with power corrupting, is the idea with like what Aya does to actually end it once and for all. I feel like it's a combination of the fact that like she has a very strong personality, and the fact that like she's intelligent enough to know that she can't let this thing hang around long enough. Like
yeah.
she binds it Wounded, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. She binds Wounded, has him or her for all of like 5 minutes, and takes care of everything, because like not only does she know that that's the smart thing to do and the effective thing to do, she has the strength to do it, and she knows what happens if you hang on to
Yeah.
beyond that. So she's like, she is a foil for Mati in the sense that like she actually wants to fix everything for like a noble purpose, I guess. Whereas Mati like thinks that he does, but really it has more to do with his personal trauma than it
Mhm.
does with like a larger cause.
Yeah. I see it as like quite often like when you reach the end of like a big series, it always feels like there has to be like a massive war, and it has to be like, oh, the good versus evil big thing. I loved the ending of this book where Liat is just like, uh do this, do this, do that, go away. And then it's like 2 pages where she actually has an and that, and it's all done.
Me and Aya,
Aya, so who do I say?
Liat.
Oh, I don't know why. It's because I was
Did I
just
say
saying,
Liat?
I don't know. If we said Liat, we meant Kiat. No, Kiat. We meant the character in this book that we meant. No,
I
I
meant
is just like,
I meant Amat actually.
oh my god. Good luck editing this. Top.
One thing that you made me think of when you just said that is that I liked how we got that good versus evil thing. Well, not quite good versus evil, because that's not the right way to describe the setup like in this series, but we got that in an autumn war essentially.
Yes.
And then the price of spring is almost like entirely a falling action, like not quite, because it has its own plot and like it's still very satisfying, but it essentially is a falling action,
Mm-hmm.
like a resolution from what happened before.
Yeah.
So you don't have the big climax right at the end. You had the biggest event in terms of like scope happen in the third book.
And I think that that it makes sense when you look at it as a whole, where like there's no action in the first book, and it's all about characters. It makes sense that there's a big rise of action at the end of the third one, and then the fourth one is just resolution
Mm-hmm.
and all character work, because that's what we're here for. Like,
And
you're
it
not
wraps it up
there.
in a nice little bow.
Yeah, it's a twisted bow. It's not a super nice clean bow.
Well,
It's like
bows,
a
you have to twist bows to make them.
that's very true. But it doesn't look nice. You kind of look at it and you're like, oh, that's a janky present if I've ever seen one.
But it's solid and it won't unravel.
Indeed, that we're
That's
aware
my
of.
metaphor.
I'll tell you what. Do you know what would be interesting? Because of course Alan made a chat with us.
Right.
I'm just gonna look at what we said in that. Okay, I said, here are the words I said.
Okay.
You said Marty makes you sad because of his savior complex and continuous failure to be the person he's so fixated on trying to be. And I said Otar is everything Marty wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
I said that Otar changes the world without wanting to be the one who is responsible for everything, whereas Marty changes the world because he wants to be responsible for it. And Otar, because he doesn't want to be responsible for it, can make a better change, whereas Marty, because he's trying to actively make a difference, makes a terrible choice. You said that the letters,
Oh God, I love them.
and yeah, that's probably, yeah, the ending of this book was a real heart wrencher with the letters.
The thing that's interesting about Ota being who Mati wants to be, which is kind of like what you just said, is that Mati, if he was Ota, like wouldn't be doing a good job.
Yeah,
Like because of the difference in his priorities or in his motivations. Like he thinks that he wants to do what's right, but it's the combination of that goal really being for him and what people think of him. Whereas
yeah,
Ota is like the definition of that quote that's like, some people have greatness thrust upon them.
mm,
And Ota's like, well, I don't really want to do this, but I guess I will.
I'm here now.
Yeah.
I just happen to be here. I guess I'm gonna have to fix everything. Yeah, it's like what's the meme? He's like Shrek to the like to Marty, be like, "Can you just stop for 5 minutes?" It's just like, can Marty stop though for real? I like that Otar still makes mistakes.
Hmm.
Otar leaves Marty. He doesn't deal with Marty straight away, and I like that Idan calls him out on that,
Hmm.
where she's like, is it Balazar or is it what's the guy that goes to fight the rebels?
Sinja.
Sinja. Is it one of them? Is like you knew what Marty was doing. He sent you a letter and you did nothing. Like you've tried to balance all of these plates
I
rather
think
than
it was one
dealing
of
with
them,
something.
and I can't
Yeah, and
remember.
yeah, but he's basically like they're like you were balancing like you just thought you could balance all these plates and have everything work out without dealing with any of them. And now you've let like were you only going to deal with Marty once he's gone too far? And
Yeah.
I like that whole thing as well. Then like Ota has to come to like the realization of the friendship is over. And like rather than being like, well, a friendship's over, I'm just not going to see them anymore. And the idea of no, a friendship's over and I need to stop this person from doing something terrible.
Yeah.
Uh, which I really
Yeah.
like for Ota.
And they still, like, regardless of the fact that they know once and for all that the friendship is over, they still have interesting conversations.
They do, yeah.
That's just Ota's bread and butter, man.
It is, it is.
Like, most interactions that he's involved in just fly by because I'm just like reading them as fast as I can.
What a great book.
It was so good. I don't even know what else to talk about. I mean,
I
we've
feel like we've done a pretty good job.
we've covered a lot of ground. I'm sure there are things we're forgetting, but
Absolutely. But otherwise we'd be here for literally hours.
okay. Well, I feel like, yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. And for those of you who have read this whole series, comment on this video if you have something that like we didn't talk about that you would like to talk to us about. I'll make Ben patrol this comment section, even though I'll be the one getting the notifications, so that we can both talk to you. And then obviously, if there is something that we did talk about that you want to let us know your thoughts on, please do. And
Tag
Ben,
them as well. Leave us space and say spoiler because of course the first half is going to be a non-spoiler review. So
that's
please
a
be
very good point.
careful.
That's a very good point. Tag your spoilers. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this series. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you again to Ben for talking to me for a total of like 4 hours on these videos. And that is going to be it for this one. Thank you for watching. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and subscribe to Ben as well. I'll have him tagged or linked in the description. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.
Bye 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 bye.